Welcome everybody to On Equal Footing. We're here with a wonderful cast of different, very talented people to talk about how diversity in the gaming spaces has helped them grow, helped them meet new wonderful people, build communities, and what we think that can happen with gaming to kind of increase that side of diversity and continue making it a community that we can all have fun with. We're all going to share one embarrassing extracurricular that we did back in high school. So I'm Reinessa, and I was totally not a nerd and definitely didn't do Shakespeare Club every single year. Didn't actually read Shakespeare, just performed monologues for the entire school in a Shakespeare competition. Spiro, who is the CEO of TGS Esports, you're gonna have to dish. You have kids, so you're past being embarrassed about these things.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most embarrassing thing I probably did as an extracurricular was join a breakdance club, and that lasted one session, and I never did it again. That would have to be the top of my list for sure.
Okay, Libby, you're the senior community manager at Players vs. Cancer, which I'm sure being a community manager, you got to be able to have fun, so...
Yeah, I don't know if I guess it's like a traditional culture embarrassing. I was captain of the robotics team in high school. I still coach robotics, like I coach my old high school team, but in terms of like traditionally culture embarrassing, it would be that. I also did the musical half-heartedly because it was robotics season. Maybe the cringe is that I half committed and didn't follow all the way through on the musical.
Stef is a gaming content creator and head of narrative design at Padia Gaming.
I was definitely one of those really obnoxious theater kids. I think that's my claim to fame in this regard.
DJ, Mr. DJ, the voice of Griffball. DJ is a host, a voice actor, and a professional, shocker, DJ.
What I was embarrassed by going back and looking at things was freshman year, and for me, that was probably before most of you were born. It was in 1990, and MC Hammer was massive back then, and so I convinced my parents to get me these bright aqua blue Hammer pants, the vest and the shirt and the jacket and everything, and I have never looked back on a point in my life and gone, what the actual were you thinking, more than that moment right there?
I want to have just a little brainstorming session. Okay, so when you hear diversity, when you hear inclusion, what are the categories that you think of?
I work in community management. I started in the gaming industry by managing the largest and longest running women's stream team, Team Kitty, alongside my dear friend and business partner, Kitty Plays. And we do a lot of work about making sure women have a seat at the table. When it comes to specifically streaming, our goal was really to uplift each other and utilize the network of women. And for me, it's that concept of making sure that everybody has a seat at the table and feels represented in the media they consume or the communities that they're in. When it comes to gaming, everybody from whatever background plays games, but they might not see their own identity. So part of this concept of making things more diverse and more inclusive is making sure that you do see yourself represented wherever it is that you want to be.
Well, when I think of diversity, inclusion, equity, all of these subjects, I really think about opportunity, because I think that's an area where people can be left behind when it comes to this topic. So in my own personal experience, I've been a gamer my entire life. From literally the second I could hold things in my hands, I had a controller. It wasn't always plugged in, but I thought I was winning anyway. But as I grew older and I encountered like cultural bias and misogyny and queerphobia, transphobia, things like that. Very quickly, my path was diverted into beauty and cosmetics and makeup artistry, which is where my career actually began, despite wanting always to be in the gaming space and always wanting to be in narrative design, especially. And it wasn't really until the last 2 years that I was able to make that change because I didn't see people like me in that space. And I think it's really important for there to be representation of diverse individuals in a variety of places so that people coming up in the industry or even just looking around for opportunities can see that it's possible. And that's really important to me and part of my mission with gaming and with Padia Gaming.
Spiro, when you think of this, right, what comes to mind, right, looking at this from the esports angle?
Yeah, I think for me it's about community representation, and obviously it's whatever community that someone is a part of and feels represented equally. When you speak about esports and gaming, there's an equalizer there because age, height, weight, sex shouldn't matter, right? If you're good at a game or not good at a game, that's what's going to define success. It is really depressing to see so many many obstacles put in the way of people who want to compete, that have the ability to compete but are being stunted by opportunity. And so for me, like, there are so many communities out there that are underrepresented, and I think for me it's just that word community really hits home for what we do as an organization, and for me personally, and how we work with those communities to feel more represented in what's happening out there.
What does it mean to you, right? Whether it's specific communities or ideas that you have or ways you've approached your content creation.
In case it wasn't already obvious, because I think it's screamingly obvious, I'm gay. Shattering stereotypes. Shattering stereotypes about women in gaming. Shattering stereotypes about trans gaming, about gay men in gaming. Just the LGBTQI plus as a whole. Shattering that stereotype that if you don't fit this mold, you aren't worth being elevated. Believe it or not, it's actually a thing. And it drives me nuts watching people either get sidelined, worse yet silenced, because they don't necessarily agree with whatever the mainstream movement is at that time. And I have seen my girlfriends get this, like, not my girlfriends, but my friends who are women say that.
Space in the middle, yeah.
Yeah. Their representation is nominal at best, comparatively, even though they exceed in many different categories, performance levels that are not made by males. It drives me nuts. It's one of those things. So breaking and shattering stereotypes, shattering what the world sees as typical. We're not typical. We're individual. We're all unique. There is nothing standardized about any one of us. We need to see that as the relative point of origin for all of these different, I would say, sects of people that are seen from a community standpoint, and relate to that in a case-by-case basis instead of lump summing everybody into one group.
What I am going to ask everybody now, a moment where that stereotype or that expectation or that box that we all kind of try to put ourselves in sometimes was shattered. I never quite felt like I got along with people. I had older brothers. I played video games. I listened to heavy metal. I didn't, check any of the girl boxes. I got really into playing Dota 2, and I went to the biggest esports tournament in the world, the International. And I remember having this moment where it didn't matter that I was a woman. We literally were there because we were that obsessed with Dota. We had flown around the world from everywhere to sit in uncomfortable seats for 16 hours a day and, watch these characters fight out on a screen and not even be playing it ourselves. It felt earth-shattering to me that I had found my people through a video game. From that moment on, have never been able to imagine what my life would be like without people to share that with. And I never thought that a video game, especially one as frustrating as Dota, would be so community love feeling around it. So Spiro, we'll start with you. I want to know what moment gaming transcended your box.
Going back to 2016, I was working for a large casino company, and we opened, under my leadership, the first esports lounge in Canada. It was an opportunity for us to kind of open our doors to a new demographic of people, but not really know what the road ahead was going to be. I saw a room was small, about 150 people get together, and they were all competing against each other, but they were also friends with each other. And it was a mixture of a variety of people from all different communities, and nothing else outside of those four walls in that moment mattered. All that mattered was they were together and they were playing with each other and they were having a really good time and they were enjoying themselves. And that was actually the precipice to us opening an esports facility in Vancouver in 2019. Was we wanted to provide that safe space for people to get together under the guise of a game versus get together under the guise of a community. And so it was like, hey, if you enjoy Fortnite, come to play in this Fortnite event or experience this Fortnite event. Or if you enjoy Dota, come experience Dota. But it's bright, it's warm, it's inviting, it's safe. And it doesn't matter what takes place outside of these four walls. Within these four walls, your community is represented and you're safe here. So for me, I didn't really know what the gaming community was like prior to that. I'd spent some time at EA, but mostly on the marketing side, and so didn't really get hands-on in that type of environment. Putting on an event and seeing those people get together and play Hearthstone and Street Fighter, which is the first event we had, that's what kind of opened my eyes to how unique people can be represented with gaming as the umbrella to bring people together.
So I know that Stef grew up playing a lot of video games with siblings,
Yes.
and then fell into the World of Warcraft community,
Wow.
and definitely not time
Very,
suck.
very early. Yeah.
So I don't know if that was one of your shattering moments, but I am curious. You've, like you said, held a controller since the moment you could.
When I first sort of entered adulthood, after high school, I really was sort of pushed into the beauty world because I felt that was where I could be comfortable and where people would receive me, rather than where I wanted to be. It was like a choice of safety. As like a trans person, this is where I can be safe, because I knew that the gaming world wasn't like that for me at that time. Still to this day, there's room for improvement, certainly, but it's a lot better. I did that for a number of years and I flourished. I did work in a variety of different formats, whether it was TV or, editorial, whatever it was. It was all about storytelling. And around the time the COVID-19 pandemic began, I was going through this process of sort of like trying to figure out who the heck I was in relation to my interests, because I'd made all these choices out of like, I'm going to go into beauty because that's what I'm supposed to do. So I was sort of, going through all of that, and I decided I was going to pivot from beauty into gaming, and I would start a Twitch channel rather than continuing my existing YouTube channel. I wanted to grow it independently, so I didn't promote it on my old YouTube channel. I wanted to start really from scratch and just see what that was like. And there was this moment of realizing that I could finally just dish about nerd stuff and just like let it go. I'm obsessed with lore in video games and video game universes, and World of Warcraft. And being able to actually just fully express myself about it with other people and have them receive me and take me seriously was a huge paradigm shift after so many years of deciding things based on, I am this, so I must do this, rather than I want this, so I will do this. And from there, it's really just been this amazing feeling of getting to continue to do that. And there's this feeling almost of not believing it. I don't know. It's really great. It's really great. And I hope that more people can get to experience that at some point.
I think we all have these moments where we look at the arcade machines sitting behind us, or the purple lighting, or get out of a call where you talk about doing something really phenomenal and gaming is helping people. And we're just like, wait, how did I get here? How did I go from theater kid to this? Like, whoa, it's a lot of fancy lights everywhere. DJ, you brought up shattering stereotypes and not being put into a box. And so
Yeah.
I am sure you have a plethora of moments where you've done that. But what do you remember being a pivotal moment where you realized that gaming let you not be in the box that people tried to put you in?
Prior to being a gamer, my entire existence revolved around LGBTQI plus support, events, charities, outreach. And then I got hit by a car. Now, the irony there is that the instructions for how to not get hit by a car was written on it. It literally said dodge, and I clearly didn't. And that was when, I was in the hospital like 5.
Sorry,
Kid you not, it's hilarious because it's true.
That's so hilarious. That's really well. You're
So
telling a
it was
heartwarming
because I
story,
couldn't-
and I just like burst out laughing. I thought that's
Oh, no,
really
it's
funny.
good because that's the whole
That's
point
really
of it.
funny.
That's comedy's a fun thing. So fast forward, after I couldn't walk for 9 months, and my only reprieve while I laid and waited for all of the pieces of hardware that were still inserted in my body to finally slowly be removed over months and months of surgeries was to lay down here in what is now the gaming studio on a couch with my Great Dane and play Halo. Fast forward to 2015 was my very first gaming event ever. I'd never been to one. And to my knowledge, I always identified myself, or felt like I needed to identify myself, as gay first, and then everything else after. When I got to RTX for the Griffball World Championships, and I was shoutcasting it, and I showed up on the streets and people were like, yo, DJ. I'm like, how do they even know who I am? Well, they watch me on stream. I'm an idiot. Okay, obviously that's the thing that they do. But it was the recognition for things that I was doing in esports with community building for Griffball Hub at the time. Those are what mattered. And that's what I realized. My identity is not wrapped up in my sexuality. My identity is wrapped up in the myriad of other pieces and elements that define who we are, that make us so unbelievably unique. There was more to me than met the eye, and that I hadn't realized and seen. You're standing on a stage in front of 25,000 people watching and 1,000 people standing in front of it. No one cares. They just want you to do something you're passionate about. I'm very passionate about esports and Griffball and shoutcasting, and that's where everything changed for me. And I saw this is the direction I need to go. These are elements of me that I need to investigate and research and evolve and develop. That was when everything, like the bubble burst.
WoW was also my beginner's game, but that was actually that is one of my spaces where I was like, oh, it really doesn't matter who the person at the keyboard is, and we all have a space on the team. I started WoW raiding in, middle school, early high school with a voice changer on because I was afraid to be a girl in a lobby of anything.
Oh, wow.
And it was like I had the robot sound, but I remember joining a team, and one time I just joined with my regular self voice, no changer, no nothing, and I was like, oh, you're a girl, and I was like, oh no, here it goes. Oh, cool, okay, and that was it. But in that moment, and I think I grew up, like I said, doing competition robotics, so I've had that experience in other nerd culture stuff too, where it's like, yeah, your robot's really cool. It really is irrelevant who built it or what the person who built it is, identifies as or anything. Cool robot, let's go. As you started asking the question, everyone started telling their stories. That really was an introductory experience for me, and I think if I hadn't had that, I would have been a little bit more afraid of gaming as a space. And then you get older, and my other thing I was going to say was my first BlizzCon, my first TwitchCon of I do belong here. Look at all of these people who are like me or not like me at all, and we're all here for this thing. I think moments like that in between of oh, this is my community of all of these people. I am who I am, but also it doesn't define or determine my space in this community to be who I am, and that's always very reassuring. Sometimes you need that in the midst of a cruddy lobby or mean comments. It's oh no, these are my people.
Most of them. We don't claim those.
Most of them. Not that guy. Not that one guy in the Valorant lobby. He's not my people.
So this brings up an interesting point that is almost taboo to talk about. A lot of times, if you have an identity that's not the predominant identity in the space, the only time you are ever heard is when you're talking about your identity. Right? So we'll see that someone will always get asked to be on a women in gaming panel going on, but they'll never get asked to do a game developer panel, right? Because I know I personally feel an obligation to speak up, to try and be a role model, to try and be representation, but it's also exhausting. And so I would kind of love to hear everyone's take, right, on you're building something for a community. You're trying to increase their opportunities, and there's always going to be blockers, right? So for Spiro, it building a space, maintaining a positive, safe environment takes a lot of work, right? For DJ, his identity doesn't define him, but boy, is he outspoken for supporting people who identify similar to him, right? And that takes energy. So Stef, I'll start with you. How do you find that balance? I think this is something important to highlight.
I started content creating when I was 13 years old, and I was doing that when I was about 19 or 20. And I had never at any point during that window of time developed or understood boundaries on the internet. And so what ended up happening was I shared a little too much over the years. And I also opened myself up to maybe more than I could handle from others. And that was a huge learning experience in terms of what a person, or what maybe I or other people maybe should do in these circumstances. Because yes, we absolutely, in my experience, I absolutely want to help people that identify like me or other marginalized people that are experiencing hardship in, whatever the context might be. There is also a boundary where you have to also take care of yourself so that you can do that to the best of your ability. I think when it really comes down to the balance aspect, it's about remembering what you want to do, right? Because it can be easy to get swept up into, I guess, the discourse, especially for me as a Twitch streamer. If some kind of argument or situation starts happening in the chat, it might feel natural to me to engage. And there are certain situations where that might be the right move, but other times it can be as simple as diffusing that situation and making sure the space is safe for the individuals that you're trying to make it safe for. So if I have a large trans community in my stream and somebody comes in and starts ruffling feathers on purpose to get a reaction, it is absolutely more important that I just remove that individual and continue to make the space safe for everybody than it is for us to talk about it. Because that's doing the opposite of inclusivity. That's then creating this environment of heaviness and upset when we have enough of that. And the point is to create an environment where that's not happening.
So Spiro, you're working in physical spaces is a lot of what you've talked about, right? And communities physically come together. That's a different kind of place to keep a safe space and keep inclusive. How do you approach that, right? Like, how do you keep it about gaming, but also keep it a welcoming and open space?
It's about listening and then implementing. I'm obviously coming at it from a perspective of a cis white male and not really in a position where I've felt that personally, because it's just not prevalent. Like, it's unfortunate that there's this divide that we're all trying to get over and talk about today. And so I'm not going to sit here and say, like, I dictate this or that. I try to listen. Early on, when we opened the facility, we had a really good roster of women on our team. They came to me and said, hey, we want to do a women in gaming day here at the facility. And I said, you've got my support. Like, I'll do whatever I can, but I really need to understand from you what that means. Like, does that mean only women are allowed? Does that mean like where do we draw the line? Like, how? And they said, actually, no. Like, what we it's about inclusivity and it's about education. And so, yeah, we want to start the day with it being a women only event, but that's only going to go until a certain point, and then we're going to open the doors and let everybody in, and we're going to use it as an opportunity to get everybody together and educate and talk about how we can collectively overcome these obstacles as a community together. And so I would never have thought that that was the avenue that people in a safe space would have wanted, but that's exactly what was asked for. And so, all I can do in my role in being a support mechanism, listen and then provide the opportunity and or the platform, whether that's a physical space or a digital tournament or event or a digital series, to let that kind of information get out there, and then just try to educate as many people as possible. I think gaming in general, as we all know, is an ever evolving space. Things change every single day, and so education never stops, and we all need to be willing, ready, and able to listen, to be flexible. But then at the end of the day, we need to stand by that and then implement those changes to make things better down the road. So
Libby, your eyes just were like, yes, you got so excited by his answer. So I wasn't sure if you wanted to expand or sort of talk about your own experiences with, supporting women and the charity work and everything you do. So I'll sort of leave that up to you. I really saw your face.
Sure, yeah. No, I really appreciated what you're saying, Spiro, about like, hey, this is not a problem I run into. I'm not very often excluded, so I would like to listen to people and see what inclusion actually means. I think that's just huge. There's a lot of folks will enter a space and be like, yeah, I'm here to help, here's my opinion on what you need, and it's like, well, okay, that is a choice you made. Calling back to kind of your point on the balance, and I think it was perfectly on the nose, right, is working with Team Kitty, and especially in the charity work that we do, it's like, great, I'd love to have you, Libby, it'd be great to have you come on and talk about how you support women in gaming or how you support marginalized creators. And I'm like, how about that? And, the fact that I'm a community manager in the industry, that, the work that we do with charity streams. And I don't like that my answer is a little cheeky, but I got a little tired of only getting invited to the women in gaming panel. So I wrote my own panels. And I started submitting them to stuff. I looked for event opportunities, and I looked for places I could create content that was about the expertise that I had, that was not running a women's team and a team for marginalized creators, which is great and that I'm very proud to do, and something that I've spent I think I started working on with Team Kitty in 2015, and I have learned a lot and evolved as a community manager because of that and because of my work experience. But I got a little exhausted of, hey, we'd love to have you talk on the women in gaming panel, and we'd love to have you talk about the women's team. And instead, like, hey, that women's team raised $250,000 for charity. How? Let's talk about it. Well, one of the things that we do on the team that I'm so proud of is we take content creators and we go like, what are your dreams? What do you want to do with this platform that you have? Okay, let's try and figure it out, whether that is getting an income from a sponsor, whether that is transitioning into a role in the gaming industry. Hey, do you want to be our social media manager for a bit and then start applying to social media manager roles? What does that look like for you? And how do we go through the process of supporting people as they grow in the industry? Not just that we're a bunch of girls doing it and how cool is that, but like, what are the mechanics of how you do that? I started applying for things on my own and just creating things, and then there's a portfolio of, oh, here's my talk on community management, here's my talk on charity streaming. Now the invites start rolling to the other thing, but it can sometimes just be a matter of like making yourself a chair and putting it at the table. And that's hard because it takes energy and effort, and it's like, I carved this chair by myself and I'm gonna put it at the table, damn it. It's not the path I recommend, especially if you burn out easily, because I am like the textbook burnout case all the time in events like this that are with that purpose, that it's like, hey, there are so many other things that these people have to offer in whatever, realm that they're in. And so sometimes you just gotta talk about it. I think it's an important question because it's relevant to this. So thanks for letting me rant about that for a second.
No, I do, because it's hard, right? Because a discussion like this is important. Raise awareness to talk about our experiences, right? But it's also important that there are experiences that we have from, doing a career. This is a career, and there's a lot of work that goes into that. Yeah, I wanted to be cognizant of that. And DJ, we're gonna come back to you to wrap up this question, right? You've talked about shattering the stereotypes and breaking out of the box, and right now we're talking about, when do you put yourself back in the box in order to further the cause, and when do you smash it open so that you can just squeak rubber chickens around and not have to talk about your identity? Where's that balance for you?
The number one panels that I don't get asked to be on are LGBTQI plus panels. Even though I've been gay and out longer than most of these panelists have been alive, it's a thing because I don't, again, fit within the primary visual. I don't represent a majority of the community. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that we were doing things based on speech patterns and everything else. That seems ridiculous. I have managed to, I would say, remove certain levels of stereotypes from people who've come on my channel in an attempt to try and be a cyberbully, and it's like, you can't troll a troll kid, please. I was doing this when I had hair. But
wow, long throat.
But when you find, long time ago, when you find common ground with people, very long time ago, we're talking early, like 13, 10, I don't know. I lost it all in 13 after the accident. It's finding that common ground. What do we both do? What do we both know? What do we both play that is our baseline? And move from there. Not move from a point of, don't you come into my community and talk, but at the same time, you're here for a reason, you haven't left yet. Some people who've come in as some of the biggest trolls in my community are now some of my mods and some of my most cherished friends online. But it's about finding the balance of what you have in common with other people. My cousin Seth is going through this right now. He and his partner, who happen to both be trans, have been engaging in a new gaming community, and it's been interesting to watch that dynamic evolve. The number one thing that Seth and I both had since we were kids is you find your common ground. You find the common element, because as you continue to evolve and represent who you are in an authentic way, the genuine intention of at least being real, you have a better chance of hopefully adjusting or evolving those people around you, their perspective of the situation and of who you are, and realize it's not all about whether or not you're gay, you're trans, or otherwise. We're people. We are all people, but you have to respect all the elements of who we are. There's a balance there, and that's the piece. If they can't respect the balance, then they have to go.
I love the wholesome, but I would like to drill in a little on where the opportunity is lacking. One of the ones that I talk about a lot that's not the common thing that people think about is actually age opportunity. I think that if you are older in the gaming space, you look like you don't belong. And so this is where, Spiro's talking about being a cis white male, right? But someone who is a grandfather, who goes to an event with their kid, who knows everything. They can build a computer, they can program, they can do everything. People will look at them like they don't belong. And this is one of those weird things that nobody really talks about, but I think about that a lot as we have multi-generational gaming becoming more and more real. And I think about, there's not a lot of opportunity for people who are on the older side. I mean, it's not even that old. that you start to see that the questioning eyes, oh, you're just here for your kid, you're not actually interested. And I think there's a lack of opportunity for sort of multi-generational gaming that I do think will fix itself in about 15 years or so, when the millennials are now the old ones. But that's mine. That's one of my opportunities that I think about a lot, of how can we program for parents with young kids? How can we program for someone who doesn't have kids and just loves to game? And that's an opportunity I see lacking in this space. So DJ, we'll start with you this time. What's an opportunity that you see that's missing, or that could be expanded?
When I helped create Halo Outpost Discovery, and that was the tour that we did with 343 and the Globetrotters in 2019. One of the coolest things about that, as we were making these events happen, was watching so many different Halo players come in. Older, like this Halo's been around since 2001. So we're talking about people who may have been kids and now have kids, people whose kids grew up on it. And it was interesting because I met a father and his son and his kids and his son's son, who was 5, all 3 playing next to each other. It was one of those beautiful experiences I'd ever seen, but it was interesting to see a video game bring people together. But what you mentioned, that cross-generational gaming is the farther we go into the gaming career, the farther we go into the gaming evolution, the more generations we're going to have involved, because, I'm almost 50. I grew up with a pinball machine before I got my Nintendo NES. Otherwise, it was Commodore 64 and Atari. There is an insight that can be applied or needs to be recognized by people who've lived through multiple generational evolutions of consoles, of gaming, of PCs, of engines, of companies that have been created, dissolved, absorbed, moved, migrated, or otherwise. The evolution of games, you look at the beginning of Assassin's Creed and the very first one, which made me want to swear profusely at the screen, because you go forward and all of a sudden you go off an edge and you're like, that's not where I was walking. But you look at now what we've got with advanced movement mechanics and everything else, there's a conversation to be had that these younger generations didn't necessarily grow up with. They see it as archaic, whereas we saw it as revolutionary at the time. Adjusting that perspective to and I honestly, engaging with people who have parents. One of my favorite things to do is interview gaming parents, because a lot of times they're now they're helping their kids do what they wish they could have done. They were really good at Halo, but they didn't really see themselves as a potential for, being a pro player. Now they're helping their kids follow that dream of being a pro player. Same thing with CSGO, with Apex Legends. And it's, I think, a great thing, because now parents have a much greater understanding of the applicability when it comes to science and technology and the educational aspects of teaching their kids these type of computer basics. And you'll see a lot of people whose children are going into science and technologies field because of gaming. That was a really long-winded answer, but that was my perspective. I don't have kids. I won't have kids, but I love other people's kids because I can send them home once we're done with the event.
So, Stef, for you, what are the opportunities that you see out there that are just waiting to be seized, or what opportunities do we need to create, to keep forging forward on gaming becoming more and more diverse and inclusive?
In my experience, gaming has always been a family thing. It's always been a multi-generational thing. It's always been a connecting thing. My parents weren't avid gamers, but I remember my dad would go out and he would get the collector's edition at midnight or whenever the earliest they would open, and I'd stay home from school because my family understood that this was an important thing and that it had value long-term and emotional value, and it could create bonds. And I think there's a lot of opportunity, maybe this isn't like about professional opportunity, but cultural opportunity to reframe gaming, something that has, I guess, cultural value or social value. It's not just, and I love esports and that competition, but it's not just competition. It's not just playing an immersive game for 15 hours straight, as much as I love that as well. It has so much more potential than that when it comes to human connectivity. So an example is my partner and I are both avid gamers as well. We really like to play games that sort of challenge us to communicate and to work together. I have found that has really helped us I guess, deepen and strengthen our bond and our knowledge of each other. And I think then about, there's a lot of, posts and talks on social media about couples where one of them games and one of them doesn't. And it's this point of contention and it's this like, bitterness. And I feel like there's opportunity there to invite each other into something that is valuable. And this does, I guess, loop into this subject of who is welcome in the gaming space and who isn't, and where is there room to expand that. I guess, like, I was born in 95. I grew up late 90s, early 2000s. I grew up in a time where video games were taboo and it was like lame and weird that how much I liked them. Now, what we see with younger kids is that this isn't really the case and that it is being seen maybe as something more connecting or more unifying. And I guess I hope we can continue to see that expand and expand perhaps through family units and friend groups and relationships, because I think that can really strengthen people's bonds.
Sorry.
Okay, Libby, we'll go to you now for the opportunities you see.
Yeah, I'd love to dovetail off of that answer, because I think there's that in terms of the ability for games to build bonds, but I also feel like there is more that could be done in terms of, and I think this, if you're already in gaming, you feel this way, but if you're new to the gaming space or trying to figure it out, you don't, is that what types of games make you a gamer. So you can play a game that is building those bonds in your home, and maybe it's Animal Crossing with your kids. That doesn't make you not a gamer. It doesn't make you a specific, like, I think it's really, I worked for a while as a community manager at a studio that was primarily mobile games, and the number of players we would see, and I would do customer surveys with, they were like, "Oh no, I'm not a gamer." And I'm like, I'm calling you because you play our game. I'm not a productivity app here. Like we're like a game that you play. I think there is a ton of opportunity in making the space more inclusive, not necessarily about, identity or background or anything like that, but truly like keeping people aware that you don't have to play CSGO or Apex to be a gamer. Often we talk about in the negative way of like my community, that community, they're different, they're bad, they're not together. And I think sometimes we just gotta remember that we're all gamers at heart, even if it's different games we like to play.
Spiro, you've talked about listening and people telling you what they need and what they see. And I'm really curious what you've sort of taken away from everybody's answers, and what implementation or what what wheels are turning in your head listening to all of it.
I think for me, I'm gonna make a pro sports comparison, and apologies in advance for how, but I promise I'll tie it in together. So I used to coach hockey, and when you join hockey, you at a young age, for example, you're learning skills, both physical and developmental, as you get older, and you apply those skills as you continue to grow within the confines of that activity. If you jump in at 16 and you don't have that set of skills, it's going to be harder for you to catch up unless you're naturally gifted. And so I think what we're facing right now when we talk about diversity is gaming industry has only been cool for a very short period of time. Twitch culture is still relatively new. YouTube culture is still relatively new. And so you've got all these people at a late age jumping in that don't have the skill set that should have been developed early to accept that diversity and then apply it in their everyday experience. I think the opportunity we have is a lot of high schools now are implementing esports and gaming programs, and we're starting to see it even filter down to the elementary school level. And so as leaders, what we need to do is make sure that when that's being implemented, they're not just talking about development, they're not just talking about art, they're not just talking about the things that make the game, they're talking about how to be inclusive and how to bring people together under the guise of that activity. And if we can instill that in an early generation, that skill set is going to stay with them as they grow into whatever it is in gaming that they want to do. But the problem we have is it's so new and so recent that it's still not really figured out, and people are just kind of jumping in and learning as we go. For me, that's what it's about. And again, having two young boys, it's arming them with the skill set to be able to make whatever decisions they want to make down the road and learn from those decisions, positive or negative. In our industry, we're a bit like further, we're in the college scene and above. We need to get down to the high school and elementary school level to really instill that on a day-to-day basis, and then add the skills on top of it. So now when you've got people who are entering the gaming space, they're coming at it from a perspective of understanding.
What is it that you think is really important that the gaming space needs in its next generation? Whether it's accessibility options in development or a more diverse cast of characters coming from, the art side of things, or it's competitive teams that aren't segregated by gender, right? Like, what are we taking into that formative years of gaming development? Let's start with you, Libby. I've made you go last a whole bunch, so we're gonna make you go first.
Good. I actually have one that I really like, and it's lovingly stolen from my world of competition robotics. And the co-founder of the program was this MIT professor who's like the coolest guy in the world. His name is Dr. Woody Flowers, and he coined a phrase that we work with in the competition called gracious professionalism. And it is the idea that even though you are competing against somebody else, right? They're going to this competition, they want to win. But it's ethical competition, and it's competition with consideration of your opponent. The idea of being able to handle your stuff, be good at what you do, and set the culture of kindness and inclusion from the beginning. That it's never like, it's not being super letting your opponent win, sticky sweet platitude. It's never like, oh, you're so great, you can have this one. But it's also not like chest thumping aggression competitiveness. That it's respect for people on your team, people on a different team, people who are running the tournament. I think if you're starting with this elementary school group, that we're going to teach them how to exist in the gaming world, whether that's because they wanted to become a developer or an artist or a competitor or a streamer or whatever it is that really using the age of those participants to set the culture of graciousness and of being good people inside of this space that can be competitive and weird and nuanced. But always keeping that at the forefront. And I think everybody needs that, but if I could teach a group of elementary schools anything to start, it'd probably be that.
Stef, what are you teaching?
The first is, I think, I guess a personal anecdote for me, because I grew up playing video games at that elementary school age, I was so incapable of spelling, and I really struggled with reading until I started playing World of Warcraft. And I immediately, because I was so interested in reading all the quest texts, immediately shot up to a high school level in less than a year, because I just could not get enough. Maybe this is more, I guess, for the educators. It would be to understand the value in gaming beyond just, I guess, competition, teamwork, etc. What can be learned and what can be internalized from these beyond that is, skills, literacy, broadening their horizons to different sorts of art and different sorts of people, different cultural things. It can really be a broadening experience. And I think reinforcing that and doing that intentionally and seeing the value in games that maybe aren't very focused on education as its primary format, but just have things to read or things to do. I think that's really valuable. And the second sort of half where my mind goes is, I think there's opportunity with gaming to sort of teach the inclusion that maybe sports doesn't always teach. And everybody has a different experience with sports. For me, it wasn't so hot. I was not an athlete, and I did not have a good time in gym class. Off the top of my head, there's boys go here, girls go here. There's a lot, there can be a lot of, that graciousness isn't always there. And I think going off of what Libby said, that graciousness is really, really important. And I think gaming is a great vehicle for that because it's a unifier. And everybody, especially at an elementary level, is coming in at the same place, most likely. And being able to sort of have that unifier where, none of these other factors actually matter is really rare for it to be so, I guess, accessible that it is that level. So I think using it as a tool for, like Libby said, that graciousness is another great avenue.
So Spiro, you pretty much answered this one, right? It was your answer that pushed us down this path. So we'll come to you last if you have what you wish
Sure.
your boys are going to be taught, and we'll have DJ now give his what are you teaching the next generation of gamers, DJ?
So I taught broadcasting at a collegiate level for radio and television and streaming, because as things are evolving, you want to continue to evolve the technology into the situation. But one of the things that I found was a significant disconnect between the educational opportunities when it comes to, for example, shoutcasting, voice acting, being able to perform, I would say, adequate interviewing skills. These all are, and I just echo what Steph said, it is recognize all of the little alliances that go into there. You want to teach people how they can be better at describing their position. If you want to be tactical in explaining quickly, concisely to your teammates where you are on the map, that is a language skill. The more you read, the larger your vocabulary becomes, and the more frequent it becomes wider. Use more words, greater concepts, greater advantages. Communications, when you're talking to people and understanding how tone of voice does affect things, that also goes into the psychology of the background. At Microsoft, we taught kids about Scratch coding or Java coding for Minecraft. That's a huge thing with STEM, and that opens up the doors to so many different opportunities. You want to talk about athleticism versus esports. One of the biggest things that I had to have conversations with parents often about, especially at Outpost Discovery, was the fact that you don't have to understand why it's important to your kid, but you need to recognize and accept that it is, and how you can help them. If they're gaming for an hour and they've been sitting on their butt, guess what? You need to encourage them to take a 5-minute break. Everybody take a break. We're going to get up and we're going to run around. Being able to explain to a child, a teenager, why it's important, because the blood oxygen level increases. That increases your response level. It is going to be better. So you get them to run around the house. It's little things that tie what we need to reinforce as being valuable in that educational component into something that is enjoyable for them. Sure, they can go and ramble off about, hey, listen to what we did in Rainbow Six Siege today, and parents don't necessarily have to understand. They definitely need to celebrate with their kids. And the most important thing above all of that is we have got to continue to instill this notion that it's okay to lose. Sometimes it's hilarious to lose. You lose, I lose in so many different ways, it's not even funny. I've died more in video games than I'm pretty sure everybody else on the planet combined. But if you teach them that this is acceptable, this is okay, so you lost. But you know what, that headshot? Yeah, okay, so they shot you in the head, but that was a wicked headshot. You gotta look at the replay. Yeah, it was a wicked headshot. Guess what? Now you know next time to peek your corners. Celebrating other people's success shouldn't be something that we are afraid to do. It's something that we need to celebrate so that we are less likely to form adverse animosity towards people simply because of their skill set or because of their engagement. Be the world you want to live in, and eventually you'll exist in that world.
But there's an element here that's so important that you have all said about teaching people that you don't need to other someone in order to have fun, right? And think of the inclusive world that you have when your entertainment is not dependent on your success, and the success of someone else is not your loss, right? And so by removing othering, you just naturally make this even playing field so much more enjoyable, inclusive, safe, community building, everything. Spiro, you, like I said, you started us off on this path. I love where you led us. So if you have anything to add, or if you want to stand by your answer.
You know, educating through gaming. We actually had a real world experience in February of 2020. We held a live event and there was a CSGO LAN. One of our investors came with his wife, who is a former educator, and she was watching CSGO, pulled me aside and said, I had some questions. And my first instinct was, oh no, the killing and the shooting, and it's going to be a whole thing. And she said, what's taking place in the first minute of the game? And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, oh, people are like buying different things. And I explained to her, you know, what that phase was. And she loved it and said, like, this is actually how we can teach kids, because it's critical thinking, it's communication, and it's economy, right? This guy has a bunch of money and this guy doesn't, but this guy needs this weapon and this helmet, so he has to buy it and send it to him in this short amount of time, all while planning for how they're going to attack the opponent in the next phase. And I was like, brilliant, right? And so like and you know, CSGO obviously, and now Valorant has the same mechanics from that perspective. It's really cool to see educators talk about stuff like that. And so there are real world applications where that can take place. I think in terms of educating youth, it's important to me to say it without saying it. And so I think right now, like, we're obviously having a conversation, and whenever there are these panels we talked about earlier, they're drawing attention to something, and it increases, you know, people's eyeballs on that specific thing. And it may be good for a while, it may not be good for a while, up and down. But the beauty of children is, for the most part, like, they don't see any of that. They just want to go to school and play and have fun and hang out with their friends. And so if you can have, you know, a developer come in that's a woman, for example, without saying it's a woman developer, it's just a developer. Like, and you can bring people in from these different communities to educate based on their experience as a streamer, as a content creator. The kids aren't gonna see it as anything more than this is who that person is. Just like if they were a firefighter or if they were a police officer. Like it's the same kind of thing. And so to me, that would be the best way, is to bring in a diverse group of people to help educate without saying I'm a diverse person. And so like that to me is where it starts. And then as they get older and that understanding starts to kick in of, hey, maybe there is a disconnect here and there is an unequal playing field, is okay, now that they've got the capacity and understanding of people who they've met that fall into whatever bucket they fall into, they can now understand the diversification part of it and can say, okay, now I get it. But I've met people who I never thought of at the time was this, or this. It was just they're a developer. I think that to me is like that's how I approach it with my children. And I hope, you know, if we are able to get to a space where we're able to educate a younger audience people, we're doing it that way, where it's here's the opportunity and here are amazing people that make up that opportunity. And as you get older, then we can, you know, tackle the question. And again, hopefully by that point, things will have been better, but there's going to be a generational shift that has to happen for it to be embedded in people that this is a day-to-day thing. And it takes leaders and people like, you know, that are leading, like everyone on this call, to really, you know, put that flag in the ground and say, like, I'm going to be a part of the solution today, knowing that it might be 10 or 15 years before we actually see it fully implemented. But that's how I would approach that.
I think everybody has had such fantastic answers. We all come from so many different backgrounds. I like seeing the brainstorming and the ideas and what can come out of, most importantly, assembling a diverse group of voices with different experiences and making decisions and having discussions with that. Because the more perspectives that you have, the more perspectives you can include. So I want to thank everybody so much. Thank you for joining us here on Equal Footing. We enjoyed the time, and thank you to all the panelists for their incredible insight.